final Friday for the month of November, and of course, the end of the final business week in the month. Of course, once we come back on Monday, we're going to be looking at the start of the final month of the year 2024. It's been a long way coming over the last 11 months, a lot happening across the world and the African frontier markets as we speak. Today is the final day of the African Securities Exchange's annual meetings in Gaborone in Botswana. It's been a very interesting meeting that put together dozens of CEOs of African exchanges, securities and exchange officials, the regulators, as well as investors and market institutions being hosted by the Botswana Stock Exchange. But let's just walk you through Thursday's trading day. You saw the GSE there by 0.37 in the red. The Mauritius stock market eked out about 20 basis points on the day. Casablanca was down less than, slightly below 0.1%. The Egyptian 30 index came back from a 1.4% decline Wednesday to finish off its week in Cairo by 1.33%, the biggest recovery on the EGX since the start of the week on Sunday. On that market front, Zimbabwe stock market took about 0.75% haircut on Thursday. Nairobi down slightly by 0.03%. We haven't seen any gain on the Nairobi stock market since the start of the week. And then you find the Nigerian market coming back strongly and shaking off the bout of the central bank interest rate hike on Tuesday, took 0.5% to the upside, led in the main by big names in the banking sector. Industrial goods contributed about 0.14% to that. Insurance sector up by 0.25%. Oil and gas fell 0.5% on Thursday. Roughly speaking, the BRVM 0.22% also in the red. So got a mixed Thursday as we look at the end of the month, and funds and investment managers and asset managers begin to adjust their portfolio across the various frontiers. Let's get on to see the big stories across the regions, as it were, and that's news from the East Africa. That's where we're starting our round of Frontier Africa headlines this Friday as we go into the final weekend for the month of November. Of course, the Ethiopian authorities says they're looking into getting the reforms under Prime Minister Abiy up and running as Ethiopia looks to a fresh $250 million roughly in fresh funding support from the International Monetary Fund. All that on the back of what Prime Minister Abiy is doing in the country. Ethiopia, however, is looking at an agreement for cooperation for peace and development between the country in the Horn of Africa and Rwanda in the Eastern African corridor, just below the downside of the Ethiopian country. Zanzibar says it's collected about 17 billion shillings from mobile transactions in the country, as we saw increased a number of tourists pouring into this iconic island off the coast of Tanzania, and also making a strong mobile transactions from tourists and others visiting the Zanzibar, including big summits and conferences and meetings being held in that location. Back in Kenya, President Ruto says he wants African government or states to join efforts in building special economic zones. The special economic zones, or what's called the SCZ, as part of what the African Finance Corporation is promoting strongly in partnership with a number of international investors across the African continent. Now, President Ruto would want a cooperation, a better ties on that across the various countries and across regions within the African continent. Let's take it to Southern Africa, where Zambia inflation has surged, of course, on the back of the not so good news of the impact of El Nino, the drought that affected the hydro power plants, and then the price of electricity went up by 115% over the past few weeks and months, and that could continue into the near future as Zambia continue to find a way around the problem of that in the Southern African country. Yesterday, the Minister of Finance and Investment in Zimbabwe, Ncube, presented next year's budget. He says this year's GDP for Zimbabwe will be 2%. It's got a whole lot more ambitious in the plan. That is going to be about 6% for the year 2025 fiscal year. Zimbabwe is still battling about $21.1 billion in debt. He's very optimistic that the agriculture sector contraction will come down from 20% initial forecast to 15% because the impact of El Nino's drought is beginning to wear off. Zimbabwe is looking at about 4 times summer crop production output for the year into the new year 2025. And you can read up the rest of that presentation at the parliament yesterday from the from the finance minister, Ncube. In the meantime, Elon Musk's Starlink has been ordered to stop all operations in Namibia. We've seen complaints from Kenya as well as far as Starlink operations is concerned. There have been some brickbats between Starlink and the Nigerian communications agency as well. So the inroad of Starlinks into Africa is coming with a number of a pushback due to allegations of some issues around the equipment that you need for that internet connection and the charges being made and all of that. But it's all that in the news, by the way. Good news from South Africa. Let's just go to the top of the table. South African Airways reporting the first corporate profit since 2012. The embattled airline has also increased its flights to a number of African countries, destinations, including Nigeria, which is now 4 times weekly. In the meantime, Boxer, which is a subsidiary of Pick n Pay in South Africa, had a GSE IPO listed Thursday that added roughly 30 billion rand to the market capitalization. The parent company is still holding about 60% of the shares of Boxers, by the way. And ASEA's conference I mentioned that earlier is wrapped up today. The 3-day event enters its final day in Botswana. We wish all the delegates the best. The focus of that annual meetings was the African Exchange Linkage Project, which is headquartered, the ASEA headquarters in Nairobi, inside the building where you have the Nairobi Securities Exchange. But that is about it. Let's take a quick read through the West African headlines when Nigeria's tax reform bill passing a second reading yesterday at the Senate. The course is now clear for the bill. It's gone to the Committee on Finance. We expect it to be signed off, even by Mr. President. They got a public hearing and going to put that a very important economic reform program in place around the tax regime. The idea is to reduce tax payments by Nigerian small and medium enterprises below a higher set threshold of 50 billion naira, and individuals with less than 20 million naira annual income will be subjected to lower level of tax. All of that in play, by the way. But of course, you've got that news, 3 days state visit to France by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And of course, the back of it is all about economic cooperation. France is looking for stronger relationship with the biggest English-speaking economy in West Africa. Nigeria is very key to the authorities in France. So the president is wooing investors who've got Nigeria's Zenith Bank opening the first branch office in Paris yesterday. UBA, another Nigerian bank with a bigger global and Pan-African footprint, also says it's going to be ready with a branch office, with an office in France as well. The announcement came in via a press statement early today from the corporate headquarters of UBA, talking about the need to also add France to its operations. We've seen Access Bank as well opening operations in France. We've got about 3 Nigerian banks now going there. There's also the formation of France-Nigeria Business Council, which was part of what President Tinubu's gone there to do for the 3-day state visit, which of course comes to an end this weekend. And Development Bank and AGI said they've signed an MOU to galvanize garments and textile industry in the Republic of Benin. That's next door to Nigeria. Let's move on from there. We touched on the Southern African headlines already. Let's see what's making the headlines in North Africa, with Egypt reporting tax revenue rise to 560.7 billion Egyptian pounds for the first 4 months of this year, that's January to May, and that's coming from the Ministry of Finance reporting that in the news. The IMF has praised Morocco's progress in cutting the country's public debt, while Tunisia says its global olive oil production is on the upside. And finally, Morocco is drafting a new legislation or laws that will regulate cryptocurrency trading in the North African economy. Those are your headlines. Let's take it from here and into all the weekend. Have a great day and see you back on Monday as we start a new month and the final month of the year.